It was a crisp Saturday morning in Portland, Oregon. The sun had just risen over rows of suburban houses with their neatly trimmed lawns, American flags waving gently, and neighbors already sipping coffee on their porches. Mark Johnson, a 34-year-old IT consultant, stepped out of his two-story colonial-style house. He wore a navy hoodie, faded jeans, and sneakers that had seen better days. His brown hair was slightly messy, and his face carried the hint of stubble, the weekend look. Mark wasn't in a hurry. He had planned a slow morning, grab a bagel from the cafe down the street, maybe pick up some groceries, and enjoy the fall air that smelled of pine and distant rain. The sidewalks were quiet except for the occasional jogger with wireless earbuds bouncing to their playlist. But life had other plans. As Mark hummed an old country tune, he didn't notice the innocent-looking yellow banana peel lying right at the edge of the just across the street. Mrs. Henderson, a retired schoolteacher with silver hair tied in a neat bun, had been watering her roses. She gasped at the sight, her floral apron covered in droplets, her garden hose still running. "Mark, are you okay?" she called out, half worried, half stifling laughter. Next door, Kyle, a 22-year-old college kid with a skateboard under his arm, stopped mid-scroll on his phone when he saw Mark's dramatic fall. "Dude, that was like a cartoon," he said, trying not to laugh too hard. Soon, two more neighbors peeked out. Angela, a nurse in her scrubs heading for the night shift, and Tom, a mechanic with oil-stained jeans and a baseball cap. Within minutes, Mark had an audience. But instead of feeling humiliated, Mark sat up, brushed the dust off his hoodie, and raised both arms like a victorious gymnast. "Ladies and gentlemen, the banana peel has won this round," he declared with a grin. The small crowd chuckled. Mrs. Henderson shook her head but smiled warmly. "See, Mark, life's slippery. Best thing to do is laugh and move on." And that's exactly what he did. Mark picked up the banana peel, tossed it into the trash, and decided this little accident was going to be the highlight of his day, not the downfall. Sidewalk, shining like a trap under the morning sun. And in one unforgettable second, his foot landed right on it. His sneaker slid like he had stepped on ice. His arms flailed like a wild windmill, his coffee tumbler flew into the air, and the peaceful street suddenly turned into a slapstick scene straight out of an old comedy film. He landed on the sidewalk with a loud thud, and a shocked face that quickly turned into laughter. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it was embarrassing. But more than that, it was hilarious. Mark lay there for a moment, staring at the sky, thinking, wow, life really does throw peels at you when you least expect it. Just across the street, Mrs. Henderson, a retired schoolteacher with silver hair tied in a neat bun, had been watering her roses. She gasped at the sight, her floral apron covered in droplets, her garden hose still running. "Mark, are you okay?" she called out, half worried, half stifling laughter. Next door, Kyle, a 22-year-old college kid with a skateboard under his arm, stopped mid-scroll on his phone when he saw Mark's dramatic fall. "Dude, that was like a cartoon," he said, trying not to laugh too hard. Soon, two more neighbors peeked out. Angela, a nurse in her scrubs heading for the night shift, and Tom, a mechanic with oil-stained jeans and a baseball cap. Within minutes, Mark had an audience. But instead of feeling humiliated, Mark sat up, brushed the dust off his hoodie, and raised both arms like a victorious gymnast. "Ladies and gentlemen, the banana peel has won this round," he declared with a grin. The small crowd chuckled. Mrs. Henderson shook her head but smiled warmly. "See, Mark, life's slippery. Best thing to do is laugh and move on." And that's exactly what he did. Mark picked up the banana peel, tossed it into the trash, and decided this little accident was going to be the highlight of his day, not the downfall. 15 minutes later, Mark entered Brewhaven, the local coffee shop. The warm scent of roasted beans and baked goods filled the air. The place was buzzing. Young professionals tapping away on laptops, couples chatting over muffins, an older man reading the newspaper with his cappuccino. Mark, still chuckling from the fall, walked up to the counter. The barista, a cheerful woman in her late 20s named Sarah, noticed his scuffed jeans and messy hair. "Rough morning?" she asked with a grin. "You could say I lost a battle with a banana peel," Mark replied, shaking his head with mock seriousness. Sarah burst out laughing. "That's the best thing I've heard all week. Coffee's on the house today. Anyone who makes me laugh that hard deserves it." As Mark sipped his latte at a window seat, he thought about how embarrassing moments could actually be icebreakers, little reminders that perfection isn't necessary for joy. The people who saw him slip weren't laughing at him, they were laughing with him. And that's when the thought struck him, life is slippery. If you don't learn to laugh when you fall, you'll just stay on the ground longer than you need to. Blank, underscore, blank. On his way back home, Mark stopped at the grocery store to pick up some snacks and ingredients for dinner. The automatic doors opened, and in came the smell of fresh bread and produce. As he grabbed a cart, he spotted a familiar face, Angela, the nurse from across the street. She was off her shift now, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a casual sweater, looking much more relaxed. She smiled knowingly. "Recovered from your Olympic slip?" she teased. Mark laughed. "Barely. I'm considering adding banana peels to the dangerous objects list." Angela chuckled. "You know, I had the worst day yesterday at the hospital. Everything felt heavy. But watching you fall and then laugh it off this morning weirdly lifted my mood. Reminded me not to take life so seriously." Her words struck him deeply. What he thought was just a silly accident had actually given someone else a little relief, a moment of lightness. By the time he left the store with a bag of groceries, Mark realized something powerful. Our slips, literal or metaphorical, can end up being the thing that helps others stand a little taller. Later that afternoon, Mark was invited to Tom's backyard barbecue. Tom, the neighborhood mechanic, was the type of guy who always wore a baseball cap backwards and had a laugh louder than his pickup truck. The backyard smelled of sizzling burgers and smoky barbecue ribs. Kids chased each other around the lawn with water balloons, and red and white checkered tablecloths covered the picnic tables. As Mark arrived with a bowl of chips, Tom smirked. "Hey everyone, watch your step, banana peel champion just showed up." The crowd erupted in laughter. Mark rolled his eyes but laughed along. "Don't worry, I left all hazardous fruit at home." The teasing wasn't mean-spirited, it was playful, the kind of ribbing that makes someone part of the group. Mark suddenly felt lighter. His little morning accident had become a shared joke, and now he was the reason people were smiling. As the sun dipped lower, casting an orange glow over the backyard, Mark realized something profound. Sometimes, your slip becomes someone else's joy. And isn't that better than walking perfectly and leaving no memory at all? Evening came with a sudden drizzle. The barbecue wound down as neighbors packed up food and carried folding chairs inside. Mark lingered on the porch, watching raindrops bead on the wooden railing. The smell of wet grass and barbecue smoke mixed with the cool autumn air. He thought about how the day had started with embarrassment but had unfolded into connection. His mind drifted back to that fall on the sidewalk, arms flailing, coffee flying, and he laughed all over again. Life doesn't warn you before it gets slippery. But you can decide whether you curse the fall or laugh at the moment. The rain grew heavier, but Mark didn't rush inside. He stepped off the porch, letting the drops soak his hoodie. Standing there in the rain, he whispered to himself, "Life is slippery. Laugh and move on." By Monday, Mark's banana slip had become neighborhood legend. At the local diner, Kyle retold the story with extra details, waving his arms like he was narrating a heroic disaster. The waitress chuckled so hard she nearly dropped the coffee pot. Mrs. Henderson told her book club about it, calling it the most refreshing comedy of the season. Angela even mentioned it to her coworkers at the hospital, framing it as a reminder to find joy in small, silly things. Everywhere Mark went that week, he got a grin, a pat on the back, or a joke about banana peels. And instead of shrinking from the attention, he leaned into it. Careful, he'd say with mock seriousness at the grocery store. Dangerous fruit aisle ahead. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was connection. Mark had become a reminder in his community that mistakes, slips, and awkward moments are not the end of dignity, they're the beginning of laughter. A week later, Mark walked down the same sidewalk where it all began. The leaves had turned brighter shades of orange and red, the crisp wind carrying the smell of pumpkin spice from the cafe nearby. He paused, looking at the very spot where the peel had taken him down. This time, there was no peel, just clean pavement. But instead of fear, he felt gratitude. He realized something. We spend so much time trying to avoid slipping in life, yet it's those slips that teach us the best lessons. They connect us, humble us, and remind us to laugh when things go sideways. Mark smiled, adjusted his hoodie, and walked on, humming to himself. Because at the end of the day, life really is slippery. But when you laugh, you don't just move on, you move forward. And with that, the man who once fell on a banana peel had become the guy who taught his neighborhood, and himself, how to turn life's little stumbles into laughter-filled memories.